Hello and good evening, good afternoon, and to our colleagues in Asia, good morning. My name is Paul Rosen, and I am the Executive Chairman of Global Go, the cannabis industry's leading advisory platform. Today's webinar topic is China, tomorrow's biggest CBD market. This evening's program marks the 11th webinar that Global Go has produced. Our webinars have shined a light on emerging cannabis jurisdictions, including Colombia, South Africa, and Switzerland. Today, we are thrilled to add China to that list. In lieu of a webinar registration fee, we are encouraging each attendee to make a $100 donation to the Last Prisoners Project. The Last Prisoners Project is a nonprofit organization which aims to free and reintegrate everyone incarcerated for cannabis-related offenses back into mainstream society. We are proud to support this very important organization. The liberalization of hemp regulations in China today is quite reminiscent of early cannabis legalization in North America. While THC remains strictly prohibited in China, the recent rapid growth of the worldwide CBD market has prompted the Chinese government to develop the legal framework necessary to enable the domestic production and some forms of consumption of non-psychoactive cannabinoids. Drawing parallels from Western markets, we anticipate the accelerating development of the Chinese CBD industry, from hemp cultivation to CBD consumption in the coming years, and eventually all the way to psychoactive THC cannabis. The structural advantages that have made China the world's leading manufacturing center extend to CBD production, and China's consumption capacity, with 1.4 billion increasingly affluent consumers, matching and even surpassing the United States in several categories, leads us to believe that China is the world's largest emerging market for CBD. And that's what you're going to hear about today from a variety of local industry experts. Let's get on to today's program. Our esteemed keynote today is being delivered by Chen. Nicholas is the managing partner of Pamir Law Group, an international law and business consulting firm based in Asia with offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and Taipei, with a long track record of successfully closing transactions in a broad range of industries in China and Taiwan. Nicholas has been traveling and working in China since 1973 and has successfully completed hundreds of foreign investments into Greater China for Fortune 500 multinational corporations, privately held and family offices, and private equity groups from the US, Europe, and Japan. He and his colleagues at his firm assist companies and investors to develop and implement practical cross-border strategies and programs to achieve safer business operations and achieve growth. Without further ado, Mr. Nicholas Chen.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me to share about 10-ish minutes of insights into doing business in China. As Paul has indicated, I've been going to China since 1973. So I am in my 47th year of China. So every time President Trump says, China, 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 I think he's talking to me. Anyway, I must be the fastest talking lawyer because I'm going to try to convey a few observations, perspectives, and hopefully some lessons in 10 minutes. This conference, I'm happy to join. It reminds me of many, many early market opening type conferences. I was talking to one of the organizers last week, and it reminded me of an aviation conference I attended in 1984. In the intervening 47 years, I've attended aircraft, aviation, finance, power, telecom, Wi-Fi, advertising, and many of the messages are similar, that one has to prepare to be an early first mover, and the focus is on prepare. That is, of course, so that one doesn't get late and miss the opportunity. And what I'd like to do is try to add a contribution about my focus on being prepared and how to remain safe. And part of that is about your mentality. It is not the United States or anywhere else. As we know, if we assume away or if we underestimate the complexities of the difference in the market, we do it at our peril. You have many advisors who you rely on, and their job is to keep you safe. I just want to highlight 2 points to focus on this one very important idea of being prepared. We have all watched the China space for decades. There were periods where the excitement and the headiness of the gold rush appeared with a tsunami of public listings on various stock exchanges around the world. There were many, many public exits. And the excitement was manifested as almost every week there was a China concept company that was listing. And what we saw a year later was every week there was a China concept company that had gone public going bust. And how could that possibly happen? So much money by so many smart investors evaporated. Why was that? There were big international law firms, big international accounting firms having done due diligence. And the assumption, of course, was that it was the same as the United States. It was document intensive. All of these large firms said, I'm going to use my questionnaire. And unfortunately, the lesson that is the takeaway, to shorten to the message, is in China, due diligence has nothing to do with documentation, verifying documents. It has to do with verifying the reality. And no one is going to put down on paper that here is a problem. You'll never find it in a due diligence exercise. And billions of dollars evaporated because people made an assumption that the US way or the international way was the Chinese way. They underestimated at their peril. So the normal things that might occur to you as an investor in North America, I would caution you, my first lesson, my first takeaway is it's not the same. I'm going to focus on a couple of takeaways and lessons. That's the first one. How we do business internationally, the assumptions we make about how the market works, I'm telling you, is not the same in China. And we think about what's good for the industry, what's good for the market, what's good for investors, what's good for how China looks if we do certain things. That's not how it works. Markets get open. Yes, there are market dynamics, but a market will become open over time when the Chinese authorities understand that it's good for China. And that is the driver. That sounds very simple and obvious, but I'll tell you there's a lot of complexity in that statement. So when we focus right now on some of the things in the flyer, the macro conditions of what we assume China will be, we hope that it will be. But when you do a deal in China, as you do anywhere else, you have to focus on the micro, how to get the deal done. There are so many deals that did not get done because the operational issues are completely different in China. So how do you manage labor? How do you manage tax? How do you manage this and that? There are 1,000 detailed operating issues that your experience everywhere else in the world will not be that helpful. So I'm just letting you know that after 47 years of getting lumps on top of lumps. Sweating the details in the micro, not the macro. Yes, every conference says this is the biggest market. Well, China is the biggest market in everything because it's just huge. That message, of course, is correct. The question is whether the investors in an ecosystem can actually realize that profit. So your own perspective, your own interest is, of course, needs to be protected. But in doing a deal in China, one has to look at the entire ecosystem. So, for example, when we brought power generation to China in the 90s and the 2000s, whether it was small, medium, or large, we quickly learned that the market was extremely fragmented. So the issues of getting a facility up and running, producing the power, selling it to the grid, connecting it to the grid was a different agency, pricing it was a different agency, sending it across the lines to another user was a different agency. So you had to look at the entire ecosystem. You couldn't just look at what it was in America, where everything was developed and well regulated. And so you had to go down the entire value chain. Telecoms was the same. There are so many examples where China is the biggest and it's the gold rush. So power, you could imagine China was power short as it was building the factory floor of the world. It needed power. Telecom, the largest cellular, 802.11. You know, we all live on our devices. I had a client who was the manufacturer of a chipset. He was the first guy to put Wi-Fi on a chipset. So we all who are on this call live on our mobile devices. Our laptop, we're watching today, we're watching on our hand phone. And this was the gold rush. Everybody would make money and it would be a massive force multiplier, except for one problem. The guy was telling me that this frequency, 802.11, was owned by the PLA. And he told me what he wanted. And at the end I said, so let me get this straight. You've just come from the movie theater watching Mission Impossible, and the theme song is playing, and you want me to go ask the PLA to vacate this frequency immediately, and you want him to give it to everybody for free. Is that what you're asking me? And the client went silent. I guess the answer's yes. I said, do you sound crazy or do you think I'm crazy? And he said, well, I'm not sure. Anyway, so that was the mission. You go to China, you now use it. You know that we were successful. It was the gold rush, but could you realize on it? Similar to CBD was about 10 years ago, a big gold rush in Jatropha, biofuels. And what was the mission, of course, was to create biofuels for the world. And similar to this is agrarian, it's farming, it's collecting. And there were many, many lessons that we learned about trying to get the ecosystem from the farmer all the way down to sales to connect the entire ecosystem. I'll tell you, there were many, many things that we learned, and that project did not pan out to be as lucrative for foreign investors as everyone had hoped. It was actually a failure, and there are many, many lessons to be learned from that for CBD players. I don't want to go over, so I'm going to try to wrap up. You know, one of the 3 takeaways for you if you're thinking about CBD for China. First, there are going to be uncertainties in how this all evolves. That's okay. Our instinct as Western players is, I got to know everything. There are a lot of, that's not going to be possible in China. There will be things you don't know, what you don't know, and you're going to have to accept that if you want to play. And so I want to take that and put that right out front. It's one of the initial hurdles that you're going to be facing. And I'm telling you, from my experience in many, many industries over 47 years, that that's acceptable and that's okay. Second takeaway is it's all about the local last mile requirements. So Having a business license to do CBD is really important. It's impressive to be able to get that. But I'll tell you, the devil is in the details with the local county, with the municipality, with the province. Can you get the PSB, Public Security Bureau, permit? All the operational issues of the last mile. How you do that, you can fall down, and many people have. That's the second lesson. And the third is to look at the whole value chain, look at the entire ecosystem, not just what's good for my company, but for the industry and for each company to succeed. You have to structure the deal so that the tide rises or falls for all ships. Nobody makes money alone in China. You have to make money together or lose money together. You don't make money from each other. So I'm trying to distill 47 years of experience into 10-minute nutshell lessons. I wish you all good luck, and I look forward to listening to the panelists who are the experts on CBD. I'm going to turn it back to Paul and take it from there, Paul.
Thank you, Nicholas. That was incredible. I myself have been doing business in mainland China since 1996, and that was one of the most intelligent analysis, concise, but really powerful. Really impressive. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights. Okay, enough of me again. Let's get on to our esteemed panel. Our moderator today is Mr. Hemming Zhu, an associate at Zuber Lawler. Hemming focuses on intellectual property and regulatory litigation. He also works on patent prosecution matters, and he possesses particular experience relating to the pharmaceutical and technology industries, which is more than relevant to cannabis. Just for our audience, we encourage questions. If you do have any questions, don't be shy. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom menu, and we'll try to create some time towards the end of the webinar for audience questions. Hemming, take it away.
Thank you, Paul. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. The first one is Mr. Brian Chen. He is the founder and CEO of Asia Horizon Group, a licensed producer focused on the emerging hemp-derived cannabinoid industry in China. The second is Mr. Tomas Ortiz, counsel at Zuber Lawler. The third is Mr. Jordan Tse, founder of Green Partner. Green Partner is a company focused on the scientific research, cultivation, extraction, and processing of medical cannabis, as well as the sales of its products. And the last one is Mr. Philip Gu, who is Chief Executive Officer of Stem Cell United, an Australian-listed plant biotechnology company. So the first question is for Mr. Brian Chen. For centuries, cannabis has played a significant role in Chinese culture. Today, as a global hemp superpower, China is covering half of the world's hemp production. What type of CBD products are available to the general public? What should we expect to see overseas?
Thank you, Hemming, for the introduction. So, to answer that question, I think we look at what is the regulation that allows in terms of CBD products today. And currently, only CBD as it pertains to topical skincare products are allowed to the general public. If you look at the regulations in the 2015 edition of the CFDA ingredient list, actually cannabis sativa leaf extract is an allowed ingredient in China. So as a result, as CBD is used in that type of product, that's fully legal. What is not legal is any kind of ingestible products such as edibles, tinctures, capsules, etc. And you'll see that these types of regulations are quite in line with regulations all over the world. If we're talking about the international market, I would say that adding on addition to that would be the availability of ingredients. So there are CBD ingredients being extracted in China, and I know that is being sold to different parts of the world right now.
Thank you. So China is a large producer of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Can you elaborate on what sort of structural advantages China would enjoy as a producer of pharmaceutical ingredients containing cannabinoids?
Sure. I think this, as everyone know that China is obviously a big manufacturing country for the world, but this is especially the case when it comes to pharmaceutical ingredients or CPG ingredients. If you look at the supply chain right now for global pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, or you look at it from the nutraceutical supply chain, actually China dominates 60 to 90% of that entire supply chain is produced in China. And as we looked at cannabinoids today, which are being used in either consumer packaged goods as ingredients or possibly drugs as ingredients, I think there's a lot of parallel there, and those structural advantages can really flow over. Where the way I see it is that China has not just production but also R&D as well as distribution as part of the global pharmaceutical and nutraceutical supply chain that can carry over right to cannabinoids. Philip, I'd love to, you can, I know you also have a viewpoint on this as well. Maybe you can also add a little bit on that.
Philip, I believe you're on. Okay.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, yes, and Brian, I would like to add a bit of more things you're talking about the legalization of cannabis, and now, and as an ingredient, CBD, and what you say is correct, and it's not publicly or legally for general use at this moment. But for cannabis as a plant has been 1,000 years. Even now, probably not many people know in China pharmacopoeia, this hemp or cannabis sativa actually is a medicine, especially now if they are only as their seeds. It's a medicine, it's a register, it's legal. And not been 1,000 years, but already in current status, it's a legal plant over there. So this could add a bit of complexity. And as what Nicholas earlier mentioned, so if we want to look at the things, we cannot just look at it blindly or simply and on that issue legalization. If we can be carefully look into the detail, we could have some rooms, not the gray area, but it's really a legal area which we can play a lot of venturing on this area later on when on some other particular questions. I probably would add in more of my opinion on the legality issues in China's cannabis or CBD space. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for that, Philip. Now turning back to Brian, in the future, will the players in China within the CBD space tend towards larger institutionalized companies, or will the market allow for smaller players, including startups?
I think this is a very interesting question, and actually, I think depending on the part of the supply chain, I think you'll end up seeing a different answer to your question. So when we look at the regulations in China, when you look upstream where it gets to cultivation or processing, we see that currently the players that are in those part of the supply chain are fairly large companies. They're either publicly traded companies or they are a subsidiary of a larger company. And the reason for that is the hurdle in order to participate in that licensed part of the business, whether it's cultivation or processing, which the Chinese government is giving a limited number of, and the hurdle is quite high. Those type of companies tend to be quite large. But when you look downstream at more of the consumer packaged goods companies that are using CBD as an ingredient, such as cosmetics companies, skincare companies, then there's really, there's really a lot more smaller startups that are actually coming onto the market. Let's just say in the past 18 months, and there's not really a restriction on that type of business. And I think overall, this is actually quite a practical framework, where from the perspective of the government, you control the ingredients where it's most risky, where THC might be involved in processing and cultivation. But you let the market dictate the demand, and actually right now, that's the smaller companies can create any number of consumer goods as long as it's legal. So I think it's a very practical framework, and depending on the part of the supply chain, this will really appear with different things. And I know certain products are already being brought to market. Actually, I've had the pleasure of actually trying one of Jordan's products in Hong Kong, and they're bringing that to market now. So that's been great.
Thank you. And lastly, with regard to those companies that provide consumer goods, Do you anticipate in the future that these companies will be largely homegrown or foreign?
I think it will be a mixture of both. I think you look at some of the, again, I think we have to take a step away from CBD specific, and we look at some of the general trends that are happening in China, more broadly speaking. So obviously, foreign products always has its own space, its own market in China. I think a lot of the traditional narrative has been higher quality goods made in elsewhere, whether it's Australia or wherever it might be, and then consumed in China. So I think that market is definitely there, and also there's always a market in China for foreign produced brands. But simultaneously, over the past few years, there has been a big trend for the growth of domestic brands. For every Nike, there's a Li Ning. For every L'Oreal, there's a Perfect Diary. So there's the growth of all these homegrown brands in China that are extremely popular over the past several years. Then they've been able to gain a tremendous market share as well. So I think what we're going to increasingly see, especially in this sector, is there's going to be for example, for a company like ours, we actually are teamed up with Nordic Oils, which is the largest European CBD brand, and we're bringing them into China. But at the same time, we're seeing the growth of many domestically made Chinese CBD brands. This year, there's a company called SimCare that has grown tremendously. And so I think there's room for both. And there's going to be different messaging, and a lot of the different, I guess, background and narrative of the brand itself will have the ability to play that out, whether that's a California brand or a Europe brand or a domestic China brand.
Can I give you a bit more of what CDB are happening now regarding the topical use? And we are in very close discussion with one of the largest cosmetic companies and 10 billion market cap. And they really on the forefront, I would say. They don't talk much because they're a listed company or probably some government kind of concern of advocating it. But obviously 15 numbers, which is get it from us, imported CBD ingredient, and we have all those registered in CFDA already. They probably on the verge of launching the product already according to their schedule. So I still believe and the momentum on the private sector really getting on. I've been in the listed company forum and for cannabis, for hemp, last year, 2019. And 58 companies, listed companies, they are in this cannabis, especially in the CDB space. Look like they still chasing me for if any like technologies from outside China can be imported into China and work with them to get their on this forefront, first mover. So I believe the CBD market will be opening very soon. And for us, we already get 2 batches of CBD imported from China, from California, and we formulate 15 these formulas being registered in China CFDA. So obviously the momentum is really going up, especially the local Chinese company. They want to push their own brand, and I think probably something would be aware for us if we want to do something for China's CBD market. Thank you, Herman.
Thank you, Philip and Brian, for those nuanced comments. So turning to Mr. Tomas Ortiz, without question, the US CBD market is an attractive and ever-growing one. However, the US market has been a fractured and rocky harbor to navigate for domestic and foreign companies alike. Fortunately, changes in law, regulations, and policy appear to signal calmer seas ahead and are poised to place China in a perfect position for meeting US market demand for CBD. In your opinion, in the next year, what does the future hold for Chinese CBD exports, and what possibilities for growth are out there?
Well, you're right. I mean, the U.S. market has been a rough sea to navigate, both for foreign and domestic companies. But that is changing, fortunately. The 2018 Farm Bill that we talk about a lot was the great big leap forward in that direction. It effectively removed hemp or cannabis and its derivatives with a certain THC threshold of 0.3% from the Controlled Substance Act. and does so in a way that its earlier incarnations did not. It leaves no question both plants and derivatives under that THC threshold are legal. This effectively opened the door to the US market for foreign companies to step in and really take the opportunity. I'll make this one point, and there are probably others on this panel that can pull out the numbers better than I can. After all, I'm a lawyer. There's a reason why I went to law school. But the US market is a growing market. Its consumption is exceeding its domestic production, despite retail sales not reaching earlier expectations due in part to the pandemic. I'm seeing projections for 2020 to reach 4.7 billion with a 14% growth from 2019 sales. Despite unemployment levels and other economic pressures, the base of US CBD consumers is still growing. Despite the shutdowns, consumers are adapting in Q2 this year. 47% of CBD consumers purchasing online. These are promising numbers, and I've heard projections out to 2025 of a 16.8 million US market. Key growth drivers here are the natural health and wellness trends, obviously product variety, expanded distribution channels, and strategic market. This is definitely, definitely the promise of opportunity in the US market. It's primed for foreign companies to take advantage of that opportunity and primed for Chinese companies to take advantage.
Thank you for that. And also, the United States is beginning to develop a cohesive and consistent legal treatment of hemp products, including hemp-derived CBD. The US regulatory regime is not yet perfect, as we all know, but it is certainly improving with the promise of opportunity. What legislative amendments, if any, do you think are needed to promote a more national market?
Yeah, so from my perspective as a lawyer, it's critical that we get cohesive and consistent legal treatment, or as close to it as possible. It's never perfect. That is one of the things that's made navigating the US market so difficult. The 2018 Farm Bill, again, takes us a good distance, but it doesn't remove all the barriers. There's still administrative enforcement. Legal hemp moved from the Drug Enforcement Agency to the US Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, which now has authority to regulate cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds. The FDA has not been tremendously active in providing guidelines on the treatment of hemp products. It's been a slow process. It has given some attention to products in the health and medical sectors, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And the FDA is getting there, but it's doing so on its own time schedule. Those looking to manufacture, distribute, import, or sell products still must comply with state-controlled substance laws. Some states have incorporated federal controlled schedules, but most have their own. As we saw just these past 2 years, this is also a moving part in conceptualizing this as a US national market, with things changing state by state. Currently, every state in the United States of America allows some form of CBD usage. In most states, CBD is fully legal, while in other states it's legal with some restrictions. But lastly, and critical to those who are seeking to import into the US market, is the treatment of hemp products by law enforcement and the courts. Putting it plainly, if products otherwise comply with US law, there is nothing under the law that would prohibit importing them into the United States. Notwithstanding the legality of these products, there still continue to be reports of seizures of legal CBD products imported into the United States. This may be due to difficulty of distinguishing legal, that is hemp-derived CBD, from illegal, say marijuana-derived, without extensive laboratory analysis. And it could be due to confusion on the part of customs officials about what is permitted. There was a lawsuit filed in the US District Court where a US-based CBD company alleged that customs had illegally seized 4 shipments of hemp between 2015 and 2018. And 3 of those shipments were alleged to have been destroyed. And the plaintiff for the US CBD company was seeking damages. It also appeared that the hemp had less than 0.3% THC, making it legal under federal law. There, the court ruled that the company could maintain its claim against the government for damages. There was no evidence that the seized material is contraband in the first place. And even though it was only a lower court ruling and that lawsuit has since been settled, I think it was huge and reflected better days ahead with a cohesive and consistent treatment of legal hemp products in the United States.
Thank you for that very comprehensive analysis. Turning to Mr. Jordan C. First question, is CBD legal in Hong Kong? And what are some tips on purchasing high quality CBD products in China?
Yeah, so CBD is legal from Hong Kong. I'm actually from Hong Kong. Although it does have stricter rules when it comes to THC levels. The majority of countries actually allow a threshold of 0.3% THC, but Hong Kong is a little stricter in that regard and only will allow 0%, which means that we are bound to isolates and broad spectrum oil. And I'm actually in the process, as Brian mentioned, of creating my own brand here in Hong Kong and trying to launch it into China. And hopefully by next year, I'll be able to secure my own source through my company, which has already gone through a trial plantation in Heilongjiang. But something that I look to and feel that is going to be beneficial for the consumers is if manufacturers or product developers use blockchain technology for traceability, especially with the stigma that Chinese quality is never top tier. This is going to really benefit the consumers to allow them to have a full comprehensive understanding of where my CBD is coming from, where is it being extracted, what kind of genetics, and so on.
Thank you. And is there a difference in the consumer markets in Hong Kong vis-a-vis the mainland?
Yeah, the only difference I see right now is that Hong Kong allows tinctures and edibles, whereas China doesn't. So hopefully China does shift gears a little bit and allow for that to be taken into China.
Thank you. And what is the current situation for farmers and extractors in China, and how can the government help in this aspect to promote CBD as a cash crop?
Yeah, so when I first started looking into the China CBD industry for my project, I quickly found out that the bottleneck for the development of CBD is in the genetics. The continuous introduction, the development of high CBD genetics is so important. I can't stress that enough. The current average for CBD content coming out of US is, I believe, around 12 to 14%. But on the other hand, China's local strains are coming in at 0.5 to 1.3%. And at first glance, it might seem that costs would be significantly cheaper in China than it would in US, especially when you consider the cheaper labor, the cheaper land, cheaper utilities, extraction equipment. But that's not necessarily the case at the moment from my experience. The local strains are just far too low in CBD content, which results in a higher amount of biomass that you're needed, a greater investment in extraction, and a higher cost for both biomass and extraction process. But with the support from the government to allow for continuous introductions of better genetics, I think that current farmers in China will be able to make more money with the same plot of land, and new farmers will be incentivized to grow this cash crop due to better profits.
Thank you. And do you feel that there are opportunities for entities, farmers in China to acquire those genetic strains from abroad through tech transfer agreements, et cetera?
Yes, I believe so. I've already successfully, well, I'm in the process of registering a strain. We have just grew out a trial plantation in Heilongjiang to prove the genetics and its capabilities to be grown in China. It is a harder process to go by. In Yunnan, when I went over, they were quite hesitant to let in new genetics. So we kind of shifted gears to Heilongjiang, and I think there's some regulations right now that is hindering that process, such as in Heilongjiang, I believe that it takes about 2 to 3 years of trial plantations for genetics to be successfully registered. And that's a problem. I don't think that it should take that long for something that's already proven in the US, and then you bring it over to China and grow it out for a year. But it's kind of in a gray area at the moment for that.
Thank you. And lastly, what are your thoughts on CBD farming regulations in the United States, and how could this benefit China?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the US, it's known that there's a grace period in between compliant THC testing and harvesting. And this loophole allows farmers to be able to harvest hot crops, which is anything over 0.3% THC. Typically, farmers are able to have their plants tested around 4 weeks before their actual harvest date in order to comply with the 0.3% THC regulation. And during testing, their THC levels may be below 0.3%, but their CBD will only be at around 6 to 7%. But 4 weeks after testing and allowing the crop to further mature and express the genetics, the CBD levels could reach a high of 17 to 19%, but the THC levels would be well above the 0.3 allowance. And this practice has been keeping farmers in the business by ensuring enough of a profit despite the price of CBD dropping at such a rapid pace. And something interesting I found last week was an article that said that the DEA was stepping in to guide the USDA on hemp regulations. Among other things, this could potentially mean shaving off time off that grace period or taking that grace period out altogether. And either way, I believe US farmers are no longer going to be incentivized to grow hemp, as their profits would really take a major blow, especially when considering they're being paid $1 per pound per percent. And not to mention that these hot crops will likely have to be destroyed and they won't be able to reuse these crops as fertilizers or seed bedding. And the risk reward for these farmers is just not really worth it in the United States. So with this in mind, CBD prices, I believe, are going to bounce back up as this will stifle the majority of small businesses growing CBD in the US. The cost of labor, utilities, seed, equipment is just too expensive there. And this is where I see China stepping in and taking over as the biggest player in the CBD industry.
Thank you for that very thorough analysis and for sharing your personal experiences. Turning to Mr. Philip Gu, first question. In 2016, SEU, an Australian entity, became the first foreign company to venture into China. What was the background and reasoning behind SEU's decision to invest in China rather than, say, Canada or the United States?
I think the simple reason, just like today, our subject here, I see China would be the future biggest CBD or hemp market, which is benefit us, and we located in Asian geography in Australia. I think we could take the advantage and not just going into US and Canada very squeezy there, I believe so. And China still almost is a virgin planet for CBD. So that's the reason I ventured into there as early as 2016, which is still was very much people seeing cannabis is very, very words being avoided even you are discussing with people. But we're looking at the future, and it's not, now it's becoming, the future is coming already. So it's a time I did it in 2016. I believe China would be the largest CBD market in the world in the future.
Thank you. And since SEU entered the Chinese market in 2016, what has been happening in the Chinese cannabis, hemp, and CBD spaces? Please share your own experiences in the last few years.
Let's take on this genetic. I think genetic was a big problem in China with outdoor growing, and the environment is not being controlled. So obviously the CBD and the content are very low. So genetic was a problem. But during the last few years, a lot of companies actually jump into this space and looking at importing or develop their own high CBD strain. You know, China, they are very strict on THC. Obviously, there's some difficulties and to do registration, as what Jordan says, and takes 2 or 3 years. Now probably getting a better environment already. And just an example, we just got this registration, Heidongjiang number 9. And I got the certification in our group on August, just a few months ago. the CBD content, it's 10% in outdoor, 5% indoor 10%, and outdoor is 5%. So obviously this is already been done. So they could really create something big, local supply. I think looking at the US CBD player wanting to export their product into China, we also not neglecting China. They are developing their own genetics. And there's some Oregon farmer asked me if we can work together, combine our genetic. I think that's one of the way, and we can do that at least on this America in a better position at developing their varieties of CBD and other CBG or CBN cultivars. Yeah, so it's been a much progress already. The environment at the beginning, people just avoid me, but now too many people just welcome me, even ask me if I can help them, and I appear in many forums in China. So that's probably one of the way we can promote us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually a great segue to the next question. How does the Chinese public, businesses, and government view CBD and hemp? And can you give some examples or share some of your own experiences? And relatedly, is there any concern when you advocate, educate, or promote the benefits of CBD within China?
Yes, in 2018, and Heilongjiang, there's a summit there. There's some advocate from states, and many people want him, and Brand was there. And be careful if you say cannabis are good for people, because their political environment and their ethical value, and there's a lot of argument that could be very different. And for me, for our company, we play low profile, and this is one keyword I think to be success in China. Second is do it slow. So I started in 2016. At that time, people are still looking at it as a taboo, and people don't want to talk about it. People just avoid me in the airport. In fact, if I talk about, oh, I'm here coming to do the hemp, cannabis, but nowadays it's different already. That means China is changing. Okay, so it's the opportunity, it is there. So there's a many detailed experience today. It's not much time we can share in other times or out of this meeting. Okay, so there's too many. Okay, that means that I think two keywords. One is to go low and to start low. It's low profile, low key, and don't go too much advocating. And second is slow and create your micro environment before you can looking at this entire ecosystem, the big market. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. That sounds like a very wise counsel. How does one import and export CBD in and out of China? And how many listed companies are doing business in the CBD and or hemp space? And relatedly, what is SEU doing currently in China?
Yes, okay, let's start from your last question. What actually we are doing? And we start from topical, because it's easier, the regulation is not that stringent. And then we are shifting now also into R&D. Hope later we can tap on those biggest medicinal market, which is, I think is more valuable. So we start from topical, and we are doing formulation. For example, I told you just earlier, we registered 15 numbers of CBD formulated cosmetic products. And so that's from topical. And second area we started, probably also we can talk topical. We partner with the China Tobacco subsidiary, and we looking at their two value from them. One is they have a lot of land. There's doing the rotating crops every 2 years. The tobacco need to crop. So there's an empty land which we can tap on, and they have their tobacco a big market, and they are also doing vaping research on this hemp space. And we are having a research agreement for 5 years. And that kind of things is, I think, should be more valuable, and from start those easier, and getting the right partner with right resources. And yeah, that's my advice and my experience. I think we should start with right partner as well. That's critical, and create the micro environment before we are doing that kind of advocating or education. That they said is education. yeah, that's how I would like to share with us. Thanks, Hermin.
Thank you. And finally, there appears to be little doubt that China has the biggest cannabis market potential. In your opinion, what are the best areas worthy of venturing into? And looking forward, what is SEU's strategy for success in China's CBD and/or hemp market?
Let me show you last year in August, we have a China listicle hemp summit in Yunnan province. And most of them attenders and including 58 listed companies who either invest or involved in CBD and cannabis. And I realized they are all looking something out of China and asking me there to give a sharing a speech there, and look like they quite short of those R&D space. For example, they always ask me if you have any like clinical trial 1 or 2 CBD or cannabinoid research result, and we can amplify, we can apply in China market. I think probably this is the one of the way play a good value in developing China's CBD market. Like us, we are connecting with the pharmaceutical companies. We are working with them and looking at those areas we believe China, for example, the epilepsy patient, they have already about 10 million epilepsy patients and I think every year 400,000. So this could be really some area we should look at it, and we are doing it, and part of that, but we have to do it from their legal framework are very much complicated. So I rather taking advantage of their policy. For example, Hainan Island, they already take it as a free trade zone, free trade island. So they give you some advantage to doing that. And they have those kind of policy. For example, any medicine being legalized in Western or outside China, they can import it into the island as a trial. And without the local FDA, I mean, this final approval. So that could be probably the way. So that also what SCU has been doing for last few years. We are always looking at the micro environment, which we can execute our plan, and not just looking at the macro environment and the big market. Many people is coming and going over to look for that. We should start with those micro, which allow us have a micro environment to do that. Thank you, Hermin.
Thank you. I also have just some general questions for the panel. So first, can someone elaborate on what sort of consumers in China are likely to purchase CBD products? And how does one develop a market for these CBD products in China in terms of, for instance, social influencers, et cetera?
I can speak a little bit on that. I think that, like you said, social influencers is a huge route to go, but also going through major distribution channels. It's essentially the education of the consumers that is lacking at the moment. Not many people are aware of what CBD is and what the effects are. And currently there's a very limited amount of products that is available in terms of diversity of products. So I think all of that needs to be stepped up a little in order for the consumer market to grow a little bit more.
Thank you. And generally speaking, how can foreign countries expect to benefit from the growth of the Chinese CBD industry? We've already touched upon some of these benefits, but I was wondering if anyone would care to elaborate more.
Yeah, I can speak on that again, I guess. It's mainly the costs of production in China is significantly lower when you have better genetics. When you're using genetics such as 0.7 to 1.3%, your costs are going to be high. It's around $1,000 per kilo of CBD isolate to produce. But when you're using something like an 8 to 9% CBD genetic, you're going to be at around a $450 cost. So that's going to really be able to provide a cheaper option while maintaining high quality overseas and to Canada or US, etc.
Thank you for that. And currently, there are only 2 provinces that allow for the sort of cannabis cultivation for CBD purposes. Can someone speak to whether or not other provinces will follow suit, follow the example of Yunnan and Heilongjiang?
I think China, there's a third province they mentioned in it, which is Jilin province next to Heilongjiang. But personally, I believe that probably would take some more time and not so positive at this time. And look like Heilongjiang and Yunnan have enough space to do these crops in China. And China's policy always, they will start from some part of that losing that regulation before they expand it to others. So look like to me is not soon we'll have another place, although there's 6 other provinces that can grow non-CBD and I mean those fiber products for hemp, but not soon. I think any third province will open for CBD. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we're out of time.
Yeah, I see us pretty similarly. Yeah.
It looks like we're out of time, and I'd like to pass it back to Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, wow. I don't think we had enough time because I have like a dozen questions that I would like to ask, but we've run out of time and there's questions from the audience. So I think what that means is we're going to have to do this again. China is a huge opportunity, a huge market, and it's impossible to compress all of the content that we'd like to present in an hour. I know I'm curious what the foreseeability is of cannabis, not CBD, but psychoactive cannabis in China. As a frequent visitor to the country, I welcome it. It will make my trips much better, frankly. And I wonder if that's something that we might imagine sooner rather than later. My view is it will happen sooner rather than later because it's a traditional plant-based medicine. And one thing that China has a glorious history with is traditional plant-based therapies. And cannabis is a plant that has incredible roots in China going back millennia. So I think this is such an exciting time for our industry. And I think it's fair to say that as China liberalizes, the entire Asia Pacific region will liberalize in its wake. So good on China for showing such leadership. I want to thank, first of all, our engaged audience for taking time out of your busy morning, afternoon, or night to join us. Hopefully you found it informative. I know I did. I specifically also want to thank Brian, Thomas, Jordan, and Philip for such incredible insights, as well as Nicholas for his keynote and Hemming for doing such an admirable job moderating. And I want to thank our sponsors, Zuber Lawler, Del Duca, Asia Horizon Group, thank you, Brian, ArcView, CFN Media, and of course, Last Prisoners Project. That's it for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much again for your time and your attention. I'm pretty sure we're going to do another deep dive into China in the next couple of months. We'll send out invitations well in advance. Until then, Godspeed, best wishes, and thank you so much for attending Global Go's webinar this evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.